When a team wins a championship, it feels like all of the past sins of a franchise is washed away. The pop of the champagne bottle is almost symbolic, exorcising demons and bringing on a new era for those players in that franchise as the alcohol flows down their throats. As I sit here in March of 2026, the Seattle Seahawks have just won their second Super Bowl in franchise history. It had been 12 years since their last title, and in the grand scheme of things and compared to other less fortunate franchises, that number doesn't feel all that large. However, the last time the Seahawks faced the Patriots in the Super Bowl, well, as of right now, it's probably the single most famous highlight in NFL history.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal.
See, the longer the note, the more dread.
If you've heeded my instructions, you should be sitting in your slightly radioactive desk chair thinking of many moments in the last 25 years that rival that one. Perhaps one or two that are many times more iconic. But remember, I haven't experienced those yet, and I'm willing to bet that some have even forgotten the compelling statistics of yesteryear that are worth retelling. The Seahawks went through 12 years of pain between championships, but as stated before, many teams went through far longer periods of misery, with varying degrees of pessimism and optimism. The Green Bay Packers were the darlings of the golden age of the Super Bowl era, so much so that the trophy everyone plays for is named after Vince Lombardi. By the time the 80s rolled around, though, the frozen tundra more closely resembled its natural namesake. The Packers were a walking joke with distant memories of glory. It wasn't until the mid-90s before they would bring home the trophy that bared the name of their coach again. The Packers are a nice story of riches to rags to riches again, but most aren't so fortunate. Many franchises don't even get to have the memories of success, with 11 teams in the NFL never touching a Lombardi in their existence. Many franchises know the pain of a Super Bowl loss all too well. 1 yard short, the helicopter dive, 18-1. The statistical anomaly that everyone remembers is the Bills losing 4 in a row in the early 90s. Surely a stat that will never be repeated. Sorry, Titans fans. Along with the Bills, the Vikings, Broncos, and Patriots are the franchises you think of when you think of losing in the Super Bowl. Yes, I said the Patriots. Many people forget that before the dynasty of the Brady and Belichick era, the Pats lost 2 Super Bowls, and during the Brady era, lost another 3. And now with the recent loss to the Seahawks in Super Bowl 60, now have the record with most Super Bowl losses with 6. For 4 teams, the thought of losing a Super Bowl is a dream in of itself. Because for franchises that have existed since the Super Bowl era, 60 years is the minimum length of time that they have been ringless in professional football. The longest in that regard is the Cardinals, last winning the NFL title in 1947, and back then they were the Chicago Cardinals. They also have the longest losing streak of any team ever, losing 29 games straight during the 1940s, more than the 1976-77 expansion Buccaneers. I was surprised too. For a look at some modern statistics, a fun data point from the 2025-26 season that Jets fans of the 2050s will hate that I've brought up again, is that they are the first team in history to not record a single interception in one whole season. Truly a stat only the modern Jets can have. On the topic of turnovers, such a distasteful stat doesn't have to define a career. The most interceptions thrown by a rookie QB is still held by Peyton Manning with 28 in 1998, as Eli Manning won't let us forget.
There it is, Peyton.
NFL
all
rookie
the
record,
people that intercepted you. I got everyone's card that intercepted you your rookie year.
The most career interceptions all time is still held by Brett Favre. Both players, by the end, walked away with busts in Canton. Continuing on in our pursuit of sadness, we come across two franchises of the No Fun League that seem to manufacture it year in and year out, the Cleveland Browns and the aforementioned New York Jets. There was a time in the not-so-distant past where the Detroit Lions would join them in the wailing and gnashing of teeth club, but as of right now, they seem to be on track for future success, although, again, you would know better than I. The Jets, while having a championship in their history, currently have the longest drought of playoff appearances, having missed every year since 2010. You would think with this decade-long ineptitude, they would have had the chance to have a first overall pick and fix themselves. But no, they always seem to screw that up too. The last time they picked first overall was in 1996 when they drafted Keyshawn Johnson, who was a decent enough player but not a franchise building block. He was traded to Tampa and ended up winning a Super Bowl, something the Jets are used to at this point. The Jets have become the hole where promising young QBs in particular go to die. Sam Darnold was almost a member of that statistic, but he managed to save himself. It's something that the Browns organization can't seem to do.
There's a gleam. Let's get the gleam, all right? Let's go.
On January 11th, 1987, the Denver Broncos and the Cleveland Browns were playing for the AFC Championship and for the right to go to Super Bowl 21. About 100 miles to the west in Toledo, Ohio, two brothers dressed in full Browns gear prepare to watch the game on TV, when all of a sudden a house guest of theirs enters the den holding something in her hands. The pair look at her confused when all of a sudden several bones were thrown onto the carpet below the TV set. The lady then points at the bones and says, "The Browns will never make the Super Bowl." The brothers, upset at the lady, told her to leave as they watched the game. Fast forward to the end of the fourth quarter and Browns quarterback Bernie Kosar throws a 48-yard touchdown to put the Browns up late with very little time left for the Broncos offense. The brothers, now overjoyed, started to think the lady's bones were a bunch of hogwash. Surely the Browns can't lose from here. Quarterback John Elway on his own 2-yard line orchestrates the most famous game-tying drive in NFL history, crushing the hearts of every Browns fan across the state, including my father and uncle in Toledo. Due to the heroics of John Elway and the Broncos offense, this game would be forever known as The Drive. But the football gods weren't done yet, as the very next year the Browns would return to the AFC Championship and get a shot at redemption. But they would have to face none other than the Broncos again for that shot. The game would be competitive and the Browns would have a chance to win. But again, late in the fourth quarter, disaster would strike.
Draw to Biner. Ernest Biner. Fumble the ball, and Denver has recovered. Oh, my. And Denver's Broncos will go to the Super Bowl for the second year.
While the Jets flounder from sheer incompetence, the Browns just seem to be hated by God and man alike, taken out back and shot by their owner in 1995 and brought back in 99 just to flounder around for 25 years. They announced the move in the middle of the season, which absolutely brought any hope of a successful season to a screeching halt.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a signed contract in hand. The Browns are indeed coming to Baltimore.
When they were brought back, it was almost like the 95 season had just picked back up again. Routinely spanked by their rivals year in and year out, the most abhorrent free agent signings you've ever seen, and the active wasting of one of the greatest defensive talents of this generation. I know he chose to stay, but they should take that as a sign to build a team around him. They've been so disgustingly garbage that it's overshadowed the great Browns of the past. Deshaun Watson is the tangible symbol of the modern-day Cleveland Browns, a washed-up, overpaid slob who can't stay out of the news, and for the wrong reasons. 0-16 felt like an inevitability at the time, but the modern-day Browns are arguably more disappointing. As of right this moment, the Jets are probably worse, but with teams like this, you could honestly breathe in their general direction, and all of a sudden they lose 7 in a row. Here's hoping this video ages poorly for these franchises. While the Browns seem to be the cursed franchise of the NFL, the league most familiar with curses is Major League Baseball, with the most popular one being the curse of the Bambino. The story goes, in 1920, the Boston Red Sox dealt the pitcher Babe Ruth to the rival Yankees. The Babe went on to become the greatest baseball player ever, arguably, and this tortured the Red Sox for the next 86 years. Finally, in 2004, in the ALCS, the Red Sox came back from 3-0 down to reverse sweep the Yankees and move on and win the World Series.
Here it is, ground ball to second. Reese, the Boston Red Sox have won the pennant.
The Red Sox had the most famous drought, but the longest and probably second most famous drought was the Chicago Cubs. This, known as the Curse of the Billy Goat, was a drought lasting from 1908 to 2016. It was called various other things, but the Curse of the Billy Goat was the most popular. During the World Series in 1945, Billy Goat Tavern owner William Cyanis and his goat were kicked out of Wrigley Field for disturbing the fans. Security says as he was being escorted out, he exclaimed, "Them Cubs, they ain't gonna win no more," and so excused the next 71 years of losing, because an owner of a tavern said so. Overall, that's 108 trips around the sun. The First and Second World War went by, the entire Cold War went by, and no titles. You really want a perspective on how long that is? 9 popes were chosen and died before the Cubs won another World Series. Chicago was then rewarded with a pope from their city, but he roots for the other team. The Cubs' win in 2016 was against the Cleveland Indians, now called the Cleveland Guardians, and that win handed the Indians the current longest championship drought, now at 77 years and counting. Some may say the curse was never broken, it was just handed off to Cleveland. Curses are only kind of tongue-in-cheek, at least for most people. And as far as most fans are concerned, don't believe them until it's convenient to. It's not the inept decisions by the owners, or just random errors on the field due to just being human, or the team just being terrible. No. It's because a man with a goat said so. It's a catch-all for decades of pain and mishaps, and so it's a comfort for fans. It was never in the cards anyway. Franchises you'd almost hope were cursed are the Chicago White Sox and the Colorado Rockies, the two modern teams who went back-to-back with having the most amount of losses in the history of the majors. They are beaten out by one singular team from over a century ago, the Cleveland Spiders, who lost 134 games back in 1899. My God. The saddest team in recent memory is a toss-up between the Los Angeles Angels and the Athletics. Just the Athletics. Remember, they moved from Oakland, and as of 2026, haven't officially moved to Las Vegas yet. The Angels haven't made the postseason since 2014, and basically haven't had a winning record since then. Well, the A's had one in 2021, so suck on that, LA. At least for those curses, they weren't so easily chanted at the suffering team. While the New York Rangers Cup drought doesn't have an official name, most people remember it for the last year that they won. It was constantly shouted at them from rival sports fans, mostly Islander fans. There are many theories on how the Rangers curse started, but the most famous one goes like this. After the 1940 Cup win, the MSG management burned the mortgage of the building in the bowl of the cup itself, thus desecrating it. As punishment by the ethereal gods of hockey, they were cursed to never win the cup again, or wait however long before they were allowed to win it again. But probably the largest middle finger to Ranger fans, besides not winning, was watching the rival Islanders become a dynasty in the 1980s, with players like Brian Trottier, Mike Bossy, Billy Smith, and Dennis Potvin becoming the pictures every Ranger fan puts on their dartboards when they go out to the bar after losing. During a game in October 1991 against the Islanders, the clock stopped after 20 seconds of play in the first period. So the clock read 1940. The Islander fans in attendance began chanting. The drought lasted 54 years, from 1940 to 1994. That 94 season was capped off by one of the most grueling playoff runs by any team. A Game 7 nail-biter in overtime in the Eastern Conference Final, followed by another Game 7 win in the final against the Vancouver Canucks. And the win made this picture with Mark Messier holding the trophy one of the most iconic images in NHL history. While the drought was happening, it almost felt impossible to imagine they would ever win again. But they did. which should give hope to any fan bases that are currently going through an immense drought. Because the largest drought goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, which as of 2026 have not won a cup since 1967. That's 59 years. For Toronto, though, most of that time, they haven't even been relevant. From the late 70s to the early 90s, they would constantly be blown out in the first round. Then from 2005 to 2016, they didn't make the playoffs at all. Well, except for once in 2013.
Rebound chance in front. Sagan is there. Puck comes free. Score! From Tweed Bergeron, who tied the game and won it in overtime.
Past the 2017 season, the Leafs have now become known for their heartbreaking Game 7 losses, most of them coming in the first round, and most of them dealt by the Boston Bruins. 2013, Game 7 loss to Boston. 2018, Game 7 loss to Boston. 2019, Game 7 loss to Boston. 2020, Game 5 loss to Columbus in the COVID-19 play-in round. 2021, Game 7 loss to Montreal. 2022, Game 7 loss to Tampa, and finally, 2024, Game 7 loss to Boston. From 2004 to now, they've only cracked the second round twice. For Leaf fans, every year it feels like they invent new ways to disappoint their fans. And I can't mention the Leafs without at least mentioning
They just lost!
You also can't mention the Maple Leafs without talking about their old owner from 1972 to 1990, Harold Ballard. Harold Ballard was so infamous among Toronto fans that even speaking his name causes every Leaf fan in downtown Toronto to drop to their knees and start weeping horrifically.
They come in there, get players half dressed, want to bring a broad in, that's the worst thing. If the broad comes in naked, I'm going to tell you, it takes her a lot longer to get out than it does to get in, and I told her those were the conditions. Take your clothes off and go on in, because we got guys there with cocks as long as your arm.
There are so many horror stories about Harold Ballard that it would take hours to even recount all of them. But the gist of the story is, Harold Ballard would keep the Leafs just entertaining enough to sell tickets, but not nearly good enough to ever be Stanley Cup favorites.
On his return from prison, Ballard had gained full control of the Gardens. He set out to squeeze from it every dollar he could. Now the place is filled 200 nights a year.
Because this is what it's all about, right? Motherfucking cock-sucking money. Here.
He was infamously cheap, infamously homophobic, infamously racist, infamously every bad old person stereotype you can think of. And he had a mission to run the team into the ground and scratch and scrape for every dollar he could. But the Leafs are just the most obvious ones right now. And honestly, if a team doesn't have a moment of postseason anguish, it's because they weren't good enough to get there in the first place. Every team chokes in the playoffs, and every team has their kryptonite. The Leafs have Boston, Boston has Montreal, and the funniest one right now, the LA Kings have the Oilers. The Leafs, while being frustrating every single year it seems, at least has had playoff berths, had division wins, hell, even won a playoff series in the last 15 years. The Buffalo Sabres have not. The Sabres have not made the postseason since the 2010-2011 season, in which they lost to the Flyers in the first round in 7 games. In the last 25 years, Buffalo has only made the playoffs 4 times. While the Leafs are stuck in perpetual mediocrity, the Sabres of the 21st century can't seem to swim up for air. 2015 was a key year for the franchise, a year where they finished dead last in the league. But this particular year, tanking had more of an upside than usual. Every time you get to pick first overall is a good thing, but every once in a while, rumblings of a new phenom rock the hockey world. Players like Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Eric Lindros, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, Connor Bedard, etc. And in 2015, it looked like 2 of these prospects were looking to be drafted, and were basically guaranteed to be game changers. Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel were side by side throughout the whole offseason leading up to the draft. But as time went on, it seemed like McDavid was the slightly more attractive player to get. While the Sabres were having a historically bad season, the Oilers and Coyotes were having ones almost as terrible, and were also in contention for the first overall pick. When the draft lottery came, the Sabres weren't so lucky.
And we have a winner. The first overall pick in the 2015 NHL draft belongs to the Edmonton Oilers.
McDavid, since being drafted, has become arguably the best current hockey player in the world. Buffalo would still get a generational talent in Jack Eichel, and he would live up to the hype, just not in Buffalo. Well, that's not entirely true. We still knew he was a very good player, but we could tell the Sabres were not letting him shine. Eichel would win a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights in 2023 and possibly 2026 and be a key piece on that cup-winning team. The Sabres and Eichel ended on really bad terms due to mismanagement of a neck injury. He was traded for basically nothing and sent Buffalo back into the basement. Hope is still alive for Sabres fans, however. 2026 was a really good year for the franchise, and they even made the second round. Unfortunately, they lost a Game 7 nail-biter in overtime to Montreal, but this was a really big step for the franchise. It's bad enough when a player or a whole team can't seem to win, but what about a whole country?
And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
In 1993, the Montreal Canadiens defeated the LA Kings in 5 games, and that was the last time a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. It's worth noting because before this point, Canadian teams won at least every third cup, with the Oilers and Habs having their own respective dynasties in the 70s and 80s. And during the original Six era, basically just traded the cup with the Leafs every 5 years. It's mostly a meaningless stat, like how for a while it was an alarming number of years before a team that wore blue won the cup, until the Blues and the Lightning squashed that stat. But unlike that one, the fans of said Canadian teams sure as hell care. Some teams care so much that sometimes they will destroy public property to get out their frustration. In 1994, after the Rangers squashed their 54-year-long curse, the team they beat kind of lost their minds. At least the fans did.
And because the RCMP or the local police who were having problems getting to the person who had fell, calling in the ambulance and the ambulance couldn't get to him, they started to fire tear gas to move the crowd back. Vancouver fans were chanting, "Rangers suck, Rangers suck."
That was until 2011 when the Vancouver Canucks lost another finals in Game 7. Thousands of people wearing Canucks jerseys converged on the city and began burning and flipping cars and trashing buildings, causing around $20 million worth of damage to the city. While the Canucks are the modern punching bag for this stuff, there is another huge example of unjust rioting. On March 17, 1955, the Montreal Canadiens were playing the Boston Bruins. During a power play, Maurice Richard was struck in the head by a stick, causing him to require stitches in the coming days. But before that, the man known as the Rocket got insanely mad at the Bruins player Hal Lako and broke a stick over his back. This then caused a further scrum, with the altercation resulting in Richard socking referee Cliff Thompson in the face, knocking him out cold. Richard was suspended for the rest of the season after the incident. Some Habs fans, feeling that the punishment was too harsh, gathered outside of the Montreal Forum with picket signs. A crowd of over 18,000 people, which included fans from the inside and 6,000 fans outside, began booing the NHL governing body, and some even started to smash windows and burn newsstands. The total cost of damage was over $80,000 in today's money. The one good thing for Canada, the worst record in NHL history is not a Canadian team. It's actually held by the team that plays in the US Capitol, the 1974-75 Washington Capitals, who won a grand total of 8 games in regulation that year. To be fair to the Caps, it was their first season as an expansion franchise. When you play in an arena that houses tens of thousands of people in a major city, odds are that arena does more than just hockey. This was the case for the Suns until the Phoenix Coyotes got booed out of town to Glendale. The city of Glendale only tolerated the Coyotes for so long until eventually they too were booted out. The final resting place for the Coyotes brand turned out to be the college arena for the Arizona State Sun Devils hockey program. In 2024, rumors really started to swirl that the Coyotes were looking to be sold. Alex Marwello, the owner of the Coyotes, was talking to Commissioner Gary Bettman about a possible buyout, upwards of over $1 billion. The deal goes through and the team is sold to Utah Jazz owner Ryan Smith. However, the NIL stays with Marwello. At least, it did. See, a stipulation of that deal was that Marwello would get exclusive access to an expansion franchise if he could get a land deal with the city of Tempe, Arizona to build a new arena in the next 5 years. Well, the land that was on sale, for one reason or another, was not bought by Marwello, and the Coyotes were in limbo for a while. That was until Alex walked away for good, killing any hope of a return for the Coyotes. Compared to the other three major sports, the NHL expanded a lot more than the other leagues. From 1991 to 2000, the league went from just 22 teams to 30. Then in 2017, the Vegas Golden Knights were added, making it 31 teams. And finally, the 32nd team was added in 2021 with the Seattle Kraken. That compared to leagues like the NFL, who haven't expanded since 2002 with the addition of the Texans. And even then, it was mainly to fill in a previously occupied market left by the Oilers. That wasn't until the 2025-26 season when all of a sudden Adam Silver dropped in little nuggets of hope for new fans of teams in the NBA. The two reported franchises will likely be located in, where else? Vegas and Seattle. Which makes sense. There are already professional sports arenas in both cities, and both markets seem like they can make money. Also, I'm not a Seattle resident, but how cool would it be for them in the same year they win the Super Bowl and get the Supersonics back? Speaking of basketball, the worst of the worst in terms of NBA teams is either teams that don't exist anymore or the 76ers. At least that's what it feels like. The Sixers of a decade ago were surrounded by one phrase: trust the process. A phrase uttered by former Sixers GM Sam Hinkie. This has haunted the franchise ever since. The process only resulted in playoff pain for the fans. If we can condense the heartbreak of this era to one play, we have to go to Game 7 in Toronto, May 12th, 2019. The Dagger by Kawhi Leonard.
Corner for the win!
The pain of 2019 and the years surrounding were started at the bottom, with the 2015-16 season and the abysmal 10-72 record. This resulted in the Sixers picking first overall and drafting Ben Simmons. Philly is no stranger to being awful, because in the 70s they obtained the record for worst in the NBA with 9 wins and 73 losses. This record still stands today, 50 plus years later. Now there's a difference between most losses and highest losing percentage. That glorious stat is held by the 2011-2012 Bobcats. Yeah, they were called the Bobcats for a few years there. They had a .106 winning percentage, which is just terrifying. They went 7-59 that year. Only 59 losses because the 2011-12 season was a lockout due to disagreements over a salary cap. Perpetually being terrible is awful in almost every way. The product on the court is awful to watch. You become existentially depressed because you slowly realize it's going to be multiple years before the team you like has a chance to win a championship, but it has two distinct upsides. Cheap tickets, unless you're the Dallas Cowboys, Los Angeles Lakers, Toronto Maple Leafs, or New York Yankees, and shielding from playoff heartbreak. And in the case of the NBA, there are 3 examples of this in recent memory that are the worst. The Golden State Warriors were the darlings of the 2010s, electrifying the court with players like Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry. They dominated their opponents by the incessant use of the three-point shot. This caused many teams to rally to try to beat them at their own game. One of those teams was the 2018 Houston Rockets, led by the 2 stars, James Harden and Chris Paul. The Rockets throughout the 2018 season were built to beat the Warriors in the playoffs, and in the Western Conference Finals, they got that chance. The series would go to a Game 7, and in that game, the Rockets would shoot 51 three-point shots and miss 44 of them. Safe to say the Rockets would lose that Game 7, and the Warriors would beat the Cavs in the finals for their 3rd title in 4 years. The Rockets may have been built to beat the Warriors, but I'm not sure if they fall under the category of super team. In the early 2020s, the Brooklyn Nets tried building one of their own, signing players like Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons, which in retrospect sounds like hell to play with. This team would do very well in each of the 3 regular seasons they were all a part of, but fall short in the playoffs every time. They would never even reach the 3rd round, and even worse, they only made the 2nd round once. All of these teams would be in cap hell all 3 years and scrambling to pay each player. People were happy whenever they lost because it showed that teams couldn't just buy a title and deal with the consequences later. Here's a random picture of the Los Angeles Dodgers logo for some reason. The last example I'm going to talk about is those oh-so-annoying Warriors of the 2010s. While they are known as being the team of the decade, they have one major blemish on that record, and that was 2016. Golden State that season was arguably the most dominant team of the modern era.
The greatest regular season in NBA history now belongs to the 2016 Golden State Warriors.
they would cruise through the playoffs up until the conference finals, where they would win a close nail-biter Game 7 over the Thunder. While they won the series, it would expose the weakness of that team, which was just the wear and tear that the playoffs put on players. The Warriors got sloppy and had to rely on the Steph and Klay tandem to bail them out. In the finals, though, Golden State would go up 3-1, and they would look good doing it, drubbing Cleveland by double digits in Game 1 and 2, and if they could just win one more game, they would ruin LeBron's shot at a title in Cleveland for a second year in a row. But as you may know, that didn't exactly happen. Steph Curry was fighting an injury, Draymond Green would get ejected after an altercation with LeBron, and it took Klay Thompson 4 games to wake up and play well finally. LeBron James and Kyrie Irving would drag this Cavs team, kicking and screaming, to a Game 7 and a chance to win it all, which eventually they did. In basketball, it's so easy to focus on the moneymakers, the LeBrons, the Elijahwans, the Currys, the Duncans, the MJs, but it's easy to miss the small markets and the losers. The 2021 finals being the example I think of, and honestly, if Giannis Antetokounmpo wasn't the big star that he is, it probably would have been the least watched finals of all time. But nowhere is this more real than Sacramento, California, and the Sacramento Kings. A franchise so forgotten and that is my contribution to this time capsule. A somewhat comprehensive list of failure in the North American sports world, at least for the Big Four. Of course, there's more than just the Big Four, obviously. Golf, NASCAR, tennis, bowling, and the collegiate level for all of those. And 2026 is the return of... which, funny enough, is being played in North America. Sports are so unstable, mainly because people are unstable. Things happen every day that change the course of franchises and leagues. Right now, as I write this, Myles Garrett was traded to the Rams. The New York Knicks are in the NBA Finals. Carolina Hurricanes won the Stanley Cup. And Adam Silver wants to implement AI into basketball. The next 25 years are going to be even crazier.